Have you ever been searching for houses online and you think you found the perfect place, so you schedule a showing, but when you get out there, you find this? In this video, I'm going to give you some tips on how to weed out some of these properties so you don't waste your time going out to a place that you don't want or that you can't buy. I've been doing this a long time now and I've seen it all. I constantly get calls from people about properties that seem too good to be true. Well, guess what? 99% of the time, there's a very good reason that these are priced well below everything else in the area. Well, if you see something like this, the first thing you want to do is get on Google Maps. The satellite view may uncover a surprise that didn't show up in the listing photos. Let me show you what I mean. So most of you guys know this already, but when you get to Google Maps, it has this view on it. And if you go down here to the lower left-hand corner, you hit the satellite view. And this is what I was talking about. This will uncover some of the things that they may not talk about on the listings. One of the things we have a bunch of here in our valley is gravel pits. And luckily on the satellite view, they show up pretty easily. Here's a big one here. And the reason I show you this is I was showing a house a few years ago, and these gravel pits, the word pit obviously means they're dug down into the ground, so you can't always see them. And we were going around this house, and in the backyard, there's a little rise, and you walked back there and looked over the edge, and there it was, a giant gravel pit. And obviously, that's going to affect the value of a house. Not everybody's going to want to be right next to one of those because you have the trucks going by all the time and the rock crushing noise that you're going to get. But, you know, these are just a few of the gravel pits around the valley, and there are quite a few of them down here, and some of them are in areas where kind of out in the middle of the woods here, and you know, you don't think you'd find a gravel pit there. But check out Google Maps and make sure that the houses you're looking for aren't sitting right behind one of these. Another thing that I've seen left out of listing information online is the proximity to power lines. And I had a house, again, a few years ago that I showed, and there was one of these towers directly in the backyard. And again, obviously a lot of people live near these and it's not a big deal, but when you get on Google Maps, you can find these pretty easily. They're hard to hide, obviously. And you can see right here in this subdivision, there's a big open area right in between all the houses. But when you zoom down, there's the towers. And then you can kind of follow these things all the way around the valley and see where these lines go. I know there was another house I showed one time up near Columbia Falls, that same thing. The lines were running right along the front yard and wasn't mentioned in the listing documents. So the other obvious thing to look for on Google Maps is where the airports are. And here in our valley, we have the major airport, Glacier Park International, where you're going to get the big jets, and you're definitely going to hear them if you live nearby. We have a smaller airport down in Kalispell, the Kalispell City Airport, and this one is for the smaller planes. But again, if you're in this area, you're definitely going to hear some airport noise. And then there's all kinds of smaller airports around the valley. There's even a couple subdivisions that are built around these little grass runways. So you're going to get some noise over here as well. Obviously, these people want to live near the runway. But if you're over in a different area close by, you're definitely going to hear some plane noise. The other thing that is usually understated is the amount of fixing that's needed in a fixer-upper. Be sure to look closely at the listing photos and try and read between the lines in the description. I've seen many houses where it's claimed it's a little TLC is needed, and you walk in there and it's basically gutted. and they took very interesting photo angles that didn't show the extent of how much repair was needed. And this comes into play a ton depending on the type of loan you're using. If you're using a conventional loan, you can get away with a lot more as far as a fixer-upper because you're putting a lot more money down up front. But if you're using a government type loan like a VA, an RD, or an FHA, you really have to be careful because a lot of those loans, when the appraiser comes out there, they're not going to agree to fund the house because of all the repairs that are needed, and they don't allow you to close on the house until the repairs are finished. And many times the seller isn't willing to do that. And I've talked about this before. If you find a house, you really want it, and it's a fixer-upper, but you have one of these government type loans, you're going to spend $400 on the inspection and then probably $800 to $1,000 on the appraisal, and you don't get that money back if the deal falls apart. So what that means is you'll find all these problems and call them out, and the seller doesn't have to agree to fix anything. The ball's in their court at that time, and if they say no, that means you don't get the house. You'll get your earnest money back, but now you're out $1,200 or more for an inspection and an appraisal on a house that you can't even get. So be sure you're aware of the type of loan you have and the rules that are required for the different types of loans. Here's a funny story. One time I had a guy that I was showing houses to, and he was using a VA loan, and it said right in the listing that there's a spot in there that tells you what type of financing is available on the house. But a lot of these agents, they have no idea what that means. And this guy had listed that, it will finance VA. So we drive all the way out to this house, walk in there, and VA is very strict. Unfortunately, they should be much easier to use, for our veterans, but they're very strict on the appraisal, and any safety thing is not going to fly with VA. And so this place was missing railing on the stairs. It was missing some railing on one of the decks. It was kind of a fixer-upper, and there was some flooring missing where it was just, they had ripped the carpet out and it was just plywood. That's another thing that VA will call out. We were kind of irritated that we went all the way out there and found out that it wouldn't finance VA even though it said it in the listing. So when I got back to the office, I called the agent and I said, why do you have this in MLS that it will finance VA? I said, that's basically false advertisement. And he said, well, that's not false advertisement. How do you know my guy wouldn't have fixed everything? And I said, well, if you're going to use that logic, then why didn't you advertise there's a swimming pool in the backyard? Because maybe he would have put one of those in. So I guess the point is know your type of loan and make sure you're not wasting your time looking at houses that aren't going to finance that way in the first place. And these tips don't apply just to homes. When you're looking at land, there's a lot of times where things will pop up that look like the greatest deal in the world as well. Well, again, there's usually a reason for the price. One of the big things that came up here over the past few years has to do with leased land. And I get calls, again, every time one of these goes on the market, it drives me nuts because everyone calls me and says, oh my God, look at this. It's 150 grand for a cabin on a lake. Well, the problem is it's a lease situation, and what you need to dig into is you don't just look at the price and say, oh my God, a lakefront property for $150,000. The reason it's $150,000 is because of the lease prices. And there's a lake west of Kalispell called Rogers Lake. And about 10 years ago, I think it was now, the state, it was leased land, so everybody that owned a house on there didn't own the land, they just owned the cabin. The state figured out at some point that, oh my God, we haven't been raising the price of the lease. They've been paying $1,000 a year, whatever it was, for these leases. And so then the state went in and adjusted everything to the current market values and the current rates, or what they should be, they thought. And they told everybody your, $1,000 a year is going to soon go up to $12,000 a year. And so people panicked and they started trying to get rid of these houses because, again, they don't own the land. They could call a house moving company and pick the thing up and move it, but that's a huge pain, and you know, where do you move it? And very pricey as well. So all these people were trying to get rid of these houses, and you saw some crazy prices in our MLS for, 4-bedroom house on a lake for $200,000 or whatever the prices were. They were ridiculous, and my phone was ringing off the hook, and I had to explain to them that the state changed the lease prices, and instead of $1,000 a year, it was gonna, it wasn't all at once, but it was gradually each year would keep going up, and then it would cap at like $12,000 a year. Well, that's a lot of money if you're tacking that on top of your mortgage as well. So a lot of people bailed, and it caused a lot of these crazy prices to show up in our MLS. And the other thing I see with land all the time, that you need to check your topography maps. A lot of these places are super steep. They're on the side of a mountain, they're straight up, they're very difficult to access. And again, I showed a property a few years ago. It was a 100-acre lot, and it was a pretty decent price, but we went out there, and for the 100 acres, there was maybe half an acre that was flat where you could put a house. So I'm not sure what good 100 acres does you if you only have half an acre that's livable or usable. Now you're paying taxes on 100 acres instead of the half acre that you're actually using. But a lot of people want, I want a big piece of property, but you just need to be careful. Again, like I said, when you see something that's priced really low, you can check the topography maps. Just Google, Montana topography maps, or the county you're in or the town you're in, whatever, and they'll pop up. And as you can see on this map here, if you forgot your high school classes on how to read these maps, the closer the lines are together, the steeper it is. So if you look right here, this is basically a cliff, which again might be great if you put a house on, close to it, so you got a great view off the edge. But the rest of the land, obviously, you're never going to be able to use other than tell everybody you own 100 acres. Another thing on a lot of these land listings is not only may they be super steep and unbuildable, but a lot of times they're the price they are because they're off grid, and you can't, or if you try to get power to them, it will cost a fortune because the power supply is so far away. So again, one more thing to keep in mind, and make sure you check out the maps and see what you're getting into before you go all the way out there. So hopefully these things that we talked about will help you when you're doing your search online for different properties. But if you have questions or you're not sure about a place, feel free to call anytime or shoot me an email, and I'd be happy to help.
Thank you for watching our video. Please call, text, or email for more information. And don't forget to watch our other videos about Montana.